And welcome to this week's Biz Buzz segment on the Blank Page to Bestseller podcast. I am joined by KZ and Colleen this week, as always. And this week, we're going to talk a little bit about bestseller lists. So I know in the past we've talked a little bit about what a Amazon bestseller is, but there are other bestseller lists out there, and we just kind of wanted to cover what those lists might be and what it means for an author to be a bestseller, or how, not necessarily how they're going to get on the list, but what does a bestseller mean to an author. So, first off, we will just name a couple of these bestseller lists. I know we've talked about Amazon bestseller lists, but another popular one is like the New York Times bestseller list or the USA Today bestseller list. And I'm going to turn it over to Colleen and KZ to see if they have any other bestseller lists that they have heard of or that are popular. So let me start off with Colleen.
Well, there's also the Wall Street Journal. That's a popular one, and pretty huge. But there's also these smaller lists. They're called the like Barnes and Noble, Publishers Weekly, LA Times. And what's really great about them is they pay attention more to the readers than the actual, uh, what would you say, Candy, author. They pay attention to who's really reading it.
Yes, they don't pay as much attention to the marketing that's going on by big publishers. It's a lot easier for any author, not necessarily one that is sponsored by a big name in publishing. An indie author is a lot easier has a lot easier time getting onto the Amazon list and also these smaller lists. So, and I think readers pay attention to this.
Mhm.
I do too. And did you know, I've got a couple of numbers if you guys want to hear. On the New York Times, to get on a bestseller list, you have to sell 9,000 books in a week. That's an author has to sell 9,000 books in 1 week. And then on the Wall Street Journal, they need to sell 3,000 books in a week in order to get on the list. That's pretty many books.
That's more than pretty many.
Oh, yeah, and I
that
think
that's yeah.
yeah, that's a lot of books, and I think that's why with a lot of those big national bestseller lists, you see a lot of, I mean, mostly the big five publisher, the authors who are part of the big five publishers are the only ones that are on those lists because you have to sell so many books in those. So let's say then, so let's just say you have to sell 9,000 books to get on the bestseller list. Is that possible for a indie author?
It's possible, Peter. I'm not going to say it's likely.
Hmm.
It is very definitely possible, doable. It's been proven again and again. It's not as bad as winning the lottery. Okay. Your chances are much better than that. If you are a published writer and you are putting out good work and you're building a good following and a good background, it's really not that hard to sell 9,000 copies in a day or a week rather. Um, but it doesn't happen overnight.
Hmm.
It takes time. So that's why these other lists are, I think, so critical, is because how do we build if we don't have something that we can say, hey, look at me, I'm good. you know, and these people agree. And so I think it's important that to have all variations of these lists, um,
Hmm.
for the writers and the readers.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. I'm gonna just say, like, let me just set the groundwork a little bit here too, so that we kind of are all on the same page. So yes, we mentioned that there are different bestseller lists, and we mentioned some of them have certain number of books that are needing to be sold by an author to be a bestseller. But how do these book review sites or these newspapers or whoever is putting out these bestseller lists, how do they actually calculate sales? And it's all about sales. It's how many books are being sold. And I'm going to use the New York Times because I have them up here, and they actually have a pretty decent little article on their methodology on getting people on the bestseller list or books on the bestseller list. But they actually go out and talk to, they have like thousands of diverse selling locations report their actual sales on hundreds of thousands of individual titles. That's directly from the New York Times. So a lot of these booksellers report their numbers to these best selling lists, and that's how these lists are calculated. So in my mind, and I'll ask you two if you agree or not, but in my mind, the best way to be a bestseller, the best way to get on a bestseller is to have these relationships with these booksellers. Is that true? Would you agree with that?
Well, it depends
I
on
think
what bookseller. Sorry, let me real quick say this and you jump in. To my mind, it depends on what list you're looking to get onto, but go ahead,
Mhm,
Colleen.
no, I was going to say that too. And having the relationship with anybody or any list or person or publisher, whatever, is really important.
mhm.
It's about that relationship you have with people.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think
It's
I was just gonna say, I think that's why the big publishers have such a leg up on these big, like New York Times and Wall Street Journal lists, is because they have the relationships with the booksellers.
they do, and they also have the ability to scale fast.
Hmm.
So if like when lightning hits, when lightning strikes, and a book all of a sudden jumps because
Hmm.
for whatever reason it's taken the public's fancy,
Hmm.
it can be a challenge to get enough books out fast enough. Just yesterday, I saw, or maybe the day before on the Today Show, I saw the anchor has put out a new book, and within a day it was out of print, and they were having to scramble to get another printing ready, and that can happen even in something as big as that, because you have to
Hmm.
know darn well that Savannah's book, they had to know that it was going to go big, so, and it can still happen, so that's important too, but that's not something that the writer can be concerned about, or the
Hmm.
reader, but it is a
Hmm.
fact of this, and
Hmm.
having that relationship with multiple sources gives you the best control you have over that, if you have any, I guess.
Yeah, that's so true. Let me talk a little bit about Amazon bestseller real quick. I know we've talked about this a little bit more, but um, the Amazon bestseller list is a little bit different because it's basically um, Amazon doesn't really necessarily tell you exactly their calculations on everything, but it is how many books you can sell, and it's usually through a day is how you get on the Amazon bestseller list. Is that would you both agree with that?
It's not necessarily a day, it's within a 24-hour period. And what they don't
Mhm.
tell us is when that 24 hours begins and ends.
Yeah, so that
um,
is different.
and it's also based on category. So
Hmm.
it depends on how many sell in that category in that time frame.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that's important to know too. So let me separate what the Amazon bestseller list is versus some of the like the newspaper bestseller list. So like we said, 24 hours for the Amazon list. If you're the bestseller in that category, you can become a bestseller. But most of the big uh, the national newspaper bestseller list are usually based around how many books you sell in a week. So that is another variation. I know, for example, if you are an Amazon bestseller and an author, you get to be called an Amazon bestselling author, and it shows up on your page. Same thing with, like, if you're a New York Times bestseller, you can slap a little um, sticker on the front of your book that says "I'm a New York Times bestseller," which is great. But again, there are differences between the two of them. We talked a little bit about the categories for Amazon. I'm going to ask Colleen, are there categories for some of these New York Times bestsellers, or are they just one list?
Oh no, there's different categories for all of them. They have for your fiction categories, children's authors, young adult, that type of thing. So there are different categories for all of the different genres.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that's important to know because um, I have. Let me just pull up the New York Times bestseller list that we are seeing. There's different things like they separate it out into like print bestseller or ebook bestseller or nonfiction or um, they even go to the difference between like hardcover and paperback. So there are a lot of different categories that are on these big major national bestseller lists. So let me ask KZ then, moving on from the like what a bestseller list is, what does it mean for an author or a book to be called a bestseller? Is there something special that they get? Is there some sort of recognition? Is it something that authors should strive for?
Oh, it is 100% something authors should strive for. I don't believe they should stress over it. Okay, it will come eventually if you are following if you're putting out a good product and building your business, it will come. It is definitely worthwhile. You touched on it, Peter. You mentioned that they're able to claim that in their marketing,
Mhm.
and it is about validation. It truly is. It is recognition. It's both peer recognition in a sense, and obviously reader recognition, fan recognition. That recognition is really big. It validates. So someone who hasn't found you yet as a reader looks at that and says, "Ooh, somebody else liked. A lot of people like this person. Okay, they're a
Mhm.
bestseller." Um, so it's a lot of that is marketing juice. Okay, it's a lot of
Mhm.
marketing juice. But I'm going to tell you, from my perspective as a writer, the real benefit is that it really makes you feel good. I always remember Sally Field when she received her Oscar, and she said, "They liked me." Okay. And it's that feeling. It's that
Right.
feeling. It's like, oh my goodness, they liked my book. They liked what
Mm.
I wrote. Because a writer, any writer, puts so much of themselves into the piece that having that validation is so rewarding. And writing being solitary, we don't always get that. So yes, strive for it. It's worth it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I completely agree. I liked how you said that authors should strive for it, but they shouldn't stress over it because I know a lot of authors stress over whether or not they're going to land on the bestseller list when they first come out. And like you said, if you don't have everything set up and you don't have your business working in a way that promotes yourself and your book, you may not reach it. So maybe not stress over it, but definitely set yourself up. Yeah, Colleen, do you have something? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I was reading up on this, and it said that most authors and publishers are more worried about the launch than they are about long-term sales. And I thought that was really interesting because how we, try to teach our people that your book is a business and you've got to make it for long term. It's for the life of your book, the life of you, and beyond. And so I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, it sure is, Colleen, and I love the fact that you've tied that into bestseller concept because many people believe that the only time you can be a bestseller is when you launch, and that's not true.
Mhm.
You can relaunch to be a bestseller anytime you want to. You can
Mhm.
have a book that you put out 10 years ago, and if you now have in place the backing to launch that again to a
Mhm.
new audience, well, you know what? You could be a bestseller on that one.
Yeah, that's so true. And that kind of ties into a little bit about what I was going to try to close with here is um first of all, there like you said, there are no time periods on when you can become a bestseller, whether you're talking about a New York Times bestseller or an Amazon bestseller. But one final distinction that I want to kind of make is um, so when you are a bestseller in Amazon, like we said, it covers 24 hours. When you're a New York Times bestseller or a USA Today bestseller, it's per week. And one thing that I think is really cool is you can see how many weeks some of these bestsellers have been on the list. So, there
Yes.
are some very, very popular books that were released 10 or 15 or 20 years ago that have that continually pop up on some of these lists because of how popular they are. So like the probably the biggest book series in at least young adult fiction in probably the entire world is the Harry Potter series, and that those books always seem to come back to the top on some of the bestseller list. So what is good is, yes, you do want to focus on your launch to make sure people understand about it, but you can also use that as a springboard for continued success later on.
Absolutely. Good. What, that's a great analogy for it, Peter. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think that we have covered a little bit high level on what bestseller lists are and what it means to be a bestseller. Colleen, KZ, is there anything that you think you want to touch on before we head out?
I think I've said everything that I've thought about.
Yeah, and I think I've said what I wanted to say as well. I just will again repeat as a writer and as a reader, bestseller is simply one gateway, one gauge you can use. Your best way of finding out whether a book is good is just to pick it up and begin reading it.
Mm. Yeah, that's so true. I think labels are good in ways, it gives the author some validation, like you said earlier, but as a reader, what your tastes are may not necessarily be what the 9,000 other people's tastes are. So
Definitely.
don't not pick up a book because it's not on a bestseller list.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to thank both of you for joining me this week, and we are going to be back next week with a new Biz Buzz segment.